Welcome to a journey through time, a story that spans millions of years and touches the very essence of human ambition, scientific discovery, and our relationship with the natural world. This is the complete timeline of Jurassic Park, a tale that begins in the ancient past, moves through human ingenuity, and explores the consequences of playing with forces beyond our understanding. As you listen to this narration, let yourself drift into the prehistoric world, where mighty creatures once walked the earth, and then forward into a future where those same creatures walk among us once more. Let the rhythm of this story carry you gently into restful sleep, as we explore every corner of this fascinating timeline. Take a deep breath, relax, and let us begin our journey. Part 1. The Ancient World, 250 million years ago to 65 million years ago. The dawn of the dinosaurs, long before humans ever walked the earth, long before cities rose and fell, long before language or fire or tools, there was a world utterly alien to our modern understanding. This was the Mesozoic era, a time span so vast that it defies easy comprehension, stretching from approximately 250 million years ago to 65 million years ago. The Mesozoic era is divided into three periods: the Triassic, the Jurassic, and the Cretaceous. Each period saw different creatures rise to dominance, different ecosystems flourish, and different environmental conditions shape the evolution of life on Earth. In the Triassic period, the first dinosaurs began to appear. They were relatively small at first, not the towering giants we often imagine. The Earth's continents were still joined together in a supercontinent called Pangaea, and the climate was hot and dry over much of the planet. Early dinosaurs shared their world with many other reptiles, including the ancestors of modern crocodiles and the flying pterosaurs. As millions of years passed, the dinosaurs began to diversify and grow. By the Jurassic period, which lasted from about 200 million to 145 million years ago, dinosaurs had become the dominant land animals. This is the period that would later lend its name to John Hammond's famous park, though ironically, many of the dinosaurs featured in the park actually lived during the later Cretaceous period. The Jurassic world was lush and green. Pangaea had begun to break apart, creating new ocean basins and changing weather patterns. Forests of conifers, cycads, and ferns covered much of the land. In these forests roamed the great sauropods, long-necked, long-tailed herbivores of enormous size. Diplodocus, Brachiosaurus, and Apatosaurus browsed the treetops, their immense bulk supported by pillar-like legs. Predators also grew to impressive sizes. Allosaurus, with its large head and sharp teeth, hunted the herbivores of the Jurassic. These predators were perfectly adapted killing machines, with powerful jaws, sharp claws, and keen senses. The Cretaceous period, from 145 million to 65 million years ago, saw the dinosaurs reach their peak diversity. This was the age of Tyrannosaurus rex, perhaps the most famous dinosaur of all. Standing over 40 feet long and weighing several tons, T-Rex was one of the largest land predators ever to exist. Its massive jaws could exert tremendous force, capable of crushing bone. The Cretaceous also saw the rise of the raptors, intelligent pack-hunting predators like Velociraptor and Deinonychus. These creatures were smaller than the massive tyrannosaurs, but no less dangerous. They hunted in coordinated groups, using strategy and communication to bring down prey larger than themselves. Plant-eating dinosaurs continued to evolve new forms of defense. Triceratops developed its iconic three-horned face and massive neck frill. Ankylosaurus armored itself with thick plates and wielded a club-like tail. Parasaurolophus developed elaborate head crests that may have been used for communication. The skies were ruled by pterosaurs, flying reptiles that ranged from sparrow-sized to having wingspans of over 30 feet. The seas were home to massive marine reptiles, mosasaurs, plesiosaurs, and ichthyosaurs that hunted fish and each other in the ancient oceans. For over 160 million years, dinosaurs dominated the Earth. To put that in perspective, modern humans have only existed for about 300,000 years. Dinosaurs ruled for a period more than 500 times longer than our entire species' existence. The Great Extinction. Then, 65 million years ago, everything changed in an instant of cosmic violence. A massive asteroid, approximately 6 miles in diameter, struck the Earth near what is now the Yucatan Peninsula in Mexico. The impact released energy equivalent to billions of nuclear bombs. The immediate effects were catastrophic earthquakes, tsunamis, and a blast wave that incinerated everything for hundreds of miles. But the long-term effects were even more devastating. The impact threw trillions of tons of debris into the atmosphere. Dust and ash blocked out the sun, plunging the Earth into a prolonged winter. Without sunlight, plants died. Without plants, herbivores starved. Without herbivores, carnivores followed. Within a relatively short period, perhaps a few years to a few thousand years, the dinosaurs were gone. The only survivors of the dinosaur lineage were a group of small, feathered creatures that would eventually evolve into modern birds. The age of dinosaurs had ended, and the age of mammals would soon begin. For 65 million years, dinosaurs existed only as fossils' bones turned to stone, preserved in the layers of rock that form our planet's crust. They became the subject of human wonder and scientific investigation. Creatures known to us only through fragments of bones and the traces they left behind. But in their genetic code, in the ancient DNA locked within their cells, dinosaurs carried all the information needed to recreate them. That DNA would decay over millions of years, broken down by water, radiation, and time itself. By the modern era, scientists believed that dinosaur DNA could not possibly survive. It would have degraded completely long ago. They were almost right. Almost. Part 2. The Road to Jurassic Park, 1970s to 1993. The Birth of Genetic Engineering. In the 1970s, a revolution began in the field of biology. Scientists learned how to read and manipulate DNA, the molecule that carries genetic information in all living things. This new field, called genetic engineering, promised to transform medicine, agriculture, and our understanding of life itself. By the 1980s, techniques had advanced to the point where scientists could isolate individual genes, copy them, and insert them into other organisms. The first genetically modified bacteria were created, then plants, then animals. The biotechnology industry was born, with companies racing to develop new applications for this powerful technology. Among the scientists working in this field was a researcher named John Hammond. Hammond was not just a scientist, he was an entrepreneur and a dreamer. He envisioned using genetic engineering not just for practical applications, but for something more ambitious, something that would capture the public imagination in a way that medical treatments and agricultural improvements never could. Hammond wanted to bring back extinct animals. He wanted to create a park where people could see living, breathing dinosaurs. Most scientists thought the idea was pure fantasy. Dinosaur DNA, they insisted, could not possibly survive for 65 million years. DNA was too fragile, too prone to degradation. Even under the best preservation conditions, it would be long gone. But Hammond and his team made a crucial discovery. They found dinosaur DNA preserved in an unexpected place inside mosquitoes trapped in amber. Amber is fossilized tree resin, and it has remarkable preservative properties. When ancient mosquitoes became stuck in tree resin and were completely sealed inside as it hardened, they were protected from air, water, and bacteria, the main agents of DNA degradation. Some of these mosquitoes had fed on dinosaur blood shortly before becoming trapped. The team extracted blood from mosquitoes that had been perfectly preserved for millions of years. From that blood, they extracted fragments of dinosaur DNA. The DNA was incomplete. Millions of years had still taken their toll, leaving gaps and breaks in the genetic code. But Hammond's scientists found a solution. They filled in the gaps with DNA from modern animals, primarily frogs, whose DNA shared enough similarities with dinosaurs to complete the genetic sequences. This hybrid DNA was then inserted into specially prepared eggs. Through a complex process of cloning and artificial incubation, the first dinosaurs began to grow. Against all odds, Hammond's vision was becoming reality. Isla Nublar and InGen Hammond founded a company called International Genetic Technologies, or InGen, to bring his dream to life. InGen purchased an island off the coast of Costa Rica called Isla Nublar. The island was remote, with dense jungle and naturally defensible coastlines. It was the perfect location for a top-secret research facility. But Hammond didn't want just a research facility. He wanted to create a theme park, a place where families could come to see real dinosaurs up close. He envisioned restaurants, hotels, rides, and attractions. He saw children pressing their faces against glass to see a baby triceratops, families riding in vehicles through herds of Brachiosaurus, tourists watching in awe as a Tyrannosaurus rex demonstrated its mighty roar. To fund this ambitious project, Hammond sought investors. These investors naturally had concerns. They wanted assurances that the park would be safe, that the dinosaurs could be properly contained, that visitors would not be at risk. They insisted on having experts evaluate the park before it opened. Hammond also needed a second island for the actual production facility. Isla Nublar would house the public park, but the complex and sometimes messy process of creating dinosaurs needed to happen elsewhere. Hammond chose Isla Sorna, another island near Isla Nublar, for this purpose. Isla Sorna, which local fishermen called Site B, would be where the dinosaurs were born and raised before being transported to Isla Nublar for public display. Throughout the late 1980s and early 1990s, work proceeded on both islands. Facilities were built, equipment was installed, and most importantly, dinosaurs were created. One by one, extinct species were brought back to life. The scientists started with smaller, less dangerous herbivores, learning as they went, refining their techniques. As their confidence grew, they moved on to larger dinosaurs and then to carnivores. Each species presented unique challenges. Some dinosaurs proved difficult to create, with many embryos failing to develop. Others grew successfully but had health problems. The scientists had to become experts not just in genetics, but in dinosaur biology, nutrition, and medicine fields that had never existed before, because there had been no living dinosaurs to study. they also had to solve behavioral problems. The dinosaurs were not blank slates. They had instincts, social needs, and complex behaviors inherited from their ancient ancestors. Pack hunters like the velociraptors proved to be highly intelligent and dangerously cunning. Large predators like Tyrannosaurus rex required special containment measures. To prevent the dinosaurs from breeding in the wild, a crucial safety measure, all dinosaurs were engineered to be female. Without males, the dinosaurs could not reproduce, ensuring that InGen maintained complete control over the population. The dinosaurs were also designed to be dependent on a dietary supplement containing the amino acid lysine. Their bodies could not produce lysine naturally, so if they ever escaped the island, they would die within days of leaving their controlled environment where lysine supplements were provided in their food. By 1993, Jurassic Park was nearly complete. The island infrastructure was in place, the visitor center was finished, and approximately 15 species of dinosaurs roamed in carefully designed enclosures. Everything was ready for the endorsement visit that would determine whether the park could open to the public. But unknown to Hammond and his team, their genetic meddling had produced some unexpected results. The frog DNA used to fill gaps in the dinosaur genome came with an unexpected property. Some species of frogs can spontaneously change sex in response to environmental conditions. This trait had been inadvertently passed on to the dinosaurs. Some of the dinosaurs were already beginning to breed. The careful controls InGen thought they had established were starting to fail. And with breeding came growing populations that were not being monitored or counted accurately. The stage was set for disaster. Part 3, Jurassic Park, the first incident, the gathering storm. In the summer of 1993, a group of experts arrived on Isla Nublar to evaluate the park. John Hammond had invited Dr. Alan Grant, a paleontologist who had spent his career studying dinosaur fossils, and Dr. Ellie Sattler, a paleobotanist specializing in extinct plant species. He also brought in Dr. Ian Malcolm, a mathematician specializing in chaos theory, whose role was to assess the unpredictability of complex systems like, for instance, a theme park full of genetically engineered dinosaurs. Also on the tour were Hammond's two grandchildren, Tim and Lex Murphy. Hammond adored his grandchildren and wanted to share his greatest achievement with them, not realizing he was bringing them into grave danger. The endorsement team also included a lawyer representing Hammond's investors, a man concerned primarily with whether the park could be properly insured and whether it would generate sufficient profits to justify the enormous investment. From the moment of their arrival, the experts had concerns. Dr. Malcolm was particularly vocal, warning that the park represented a dangerous manipulation of natural systems that could not be predicted or controlled. He spoke of chaos theory, of how small variables in complex systems could lead to catastrophic outcomes. He warned that life would find a way to overcome the artificial constraints placed upon it. Dr. Grant and Dr. Sattler were initially more impressed by the technical achievement of bringing dinosaurs back to life. But they too began to have doubts as they toured the facility. They noticed that the park's staff seemed to have only a superficial understanding of dinosaur behavior. The animals were being treated like attractions, rather than wild animals with complex social needs and instincts honed by millions of years of evolution. The tour began on a rainy morning. The visitors boarded automated tour vehicles that would drive them through the park on a predetermined route, with recorded narration explaining what they were seeing. But from the start, things went wrong. Many of the dinosaurs failed to appear, hiding from the rain and the noise of the vehicles. The Tyrannosaurus rex, the park's main attraction, was nowhere to be seen. The Triceratops, when they finally encountered one, was sick. Dr. Sattler stayed behind to help the veterinary staff diagnose the illness, while the others continued the tour. And then the storm arrived in full force. The breakdown. In the control room, a computer programmer named Dennis Nedry was preparing to execute a plan he had been working on for months. Nedry had been underpaid and underappreciated by Hammond, and a rival company had approached him with an offer to steal dinosaur embryos from InGen, and they would pay him a fortune. To cover his theft, Nedry had programmed a security backdoor into the park's computer systems. When activated, it would shut down most of the park's security systems for a predetermined period, giving him time to reach the embryo storage facility, steal the samples, and deliver them to his contact at the dock. As the storm intensified, Nedry activated his program. Throughout the park, electric fences deactivated. Security cameras went offline. Locks on gates and doors released. The automated tour vehicles stopped in their tracks, right in front of the Tyrannosaurus paddock. Nedry grabbed a can of shaving cream modified to secretly store the stolen embryos and headed for the embryo storage facility. His plan was working perfectly. He would be rich beyond his dreams, and no one would ever know what he had done. But Nedry had made a fatal miscalculation. In his eagerness to steal the embryos and escape the island, he had underestimated the dinosaurs. When the fences went down, the dinosaurs immediately sensed their new freedom. The Tyrannosaurus rex, confined for years to its paddock, pushed against the fence. Finding no electric shock to deter it, the massive predator tore through the barrier. The rex approached the stopped tour vehicles with curiosity at first, then with predatory interest. The lawyer fled the vehicle in panic, leaving Hammond's grandchildren behind. Dr. Grant stayed with the children, trying to keep them calm and quiet, hoping the massive predator would lose interest and move on. But the Tyrannosaurus had no intention of leaving. It attacked the vehicles, flipping one over and tearing into another. The lawyer, hiding in a concrete restroom facility, was found and killed. Dr. Grant managed to lead the children to safety in the forest, but they were now separated from the rest of the group, on foot in a park full of escaped dinosaurs. Meanwhile, Dr. Sattler and the park warden, Robert Muldoon, discovered the emergency when their vehicle stopped working. Muldoon, an experienced hunter who had been warning about the dangers of the velociraptors since the park's inception, knew immediately that something was terribly wrong. As for Dennis Nedry, his escape attempt ended in disaster. Disoriented in the storm, he got lost on the way to the dock. His vehicle became stuck in mud near the Dilophosaurus paddock. When he got out to winch his vehicle free, he encountered one of the Dilophosaurs. The Dilophosaurus was a medium-sized predator that the park staff had considered relatively harmless. They were wrong. The dinosaur attacked Nedry, killing him and leaving his body in his vehicle. The can of stolen embryos rolled away, lost in the mud and rain, where it would remain undiscovered for years to come. Survival and escape. In the control room, the remaining staff realized the extent of the catastrophe. With Nedry dead and the security systems locked out by his sabotage, they had no way to restore power to the fences or track the escaped dinosaurs. The park had become a death trap, and they were responsible for the lives of everyone on the island. Dr. Grant, meanwhile, was leading Hammond's grandchildren through the jungle, trying to make his way back to the visitor center. Along the way, they encountered several herds of dinosaurs. They saw Brachiosaurus feeding in the treetops, and a herd of Gallimimus running through a field. They also had a tense encounter with the Tyrannosaurus again, forcing them to hide and remain absolutely silent as the massive predator passed within feet of them. The journey gave Dr. Grant a unique perspective on the dinosaurs. Despite the danger, he was seeing living, breathing creatures he had spent his entire career studying as fossils. He observed their behavior, their movements, their interactions with each other and their environment. He saw that they were not monsters, but animals complex, intelligent, and perfectly adapted to their roles in the prehistoric ecosystem InGen had tried to recreate. But he also realized something deeply troubling. He found dinosaur eggs, freshly hatched. The dinosaurs were breeding. Hammond's assurances that all dinosaurs were female had been wrong, or at least incomplete. Life, as Dr. Malcolm had warned, had found a way. Dr. Sattler and Muldoon, meanwhile, were attempting to restore power to the park. This required reaching an auxiliary power station on the far side of the island and manually resetting the systems. Muldoon accompanied Dr. Sattler because the route to the power station would take them near the velociraptor paddock, and he knew how dangerous the raptors were. His fears proved justified. The velociraptors had escaped their paddock and were hunting in the jungle. Muldoon and Sattler were separated. Muldoon attempted to hunt one of the raptors, but the clever predators had been hunting him. He was ambushed and killed by a pack of the deadly creatures. Dr. Sattler managed to reach the power station and restore the park's systems, but she barely escaped with her life, chased by velociraptors through the maintenance tunnels beneath the facility. Back at the visitor center, Dr. Grant and the children had arrived, hoping to find safety. Instead, they found the building had been invaded by velociraptors. The intelligent predators had learned how to open doors, and they stalked through the building, hunting the humans. What followed was a terrifying game of cat and mouse. The raptors were cunning and patient, working together to trap their prey. They cornered Hammond's grandchildren in the kitchen, and it seemed certain the children would be killed. But using their own intelligence and the environment around them, the children managed to trap one raptor in a freezer and escape from another. The survivors reunited in the main visitor center hall, but the velociraptors were still hunting them. They were trapped, with raptors closing in from multiple directions. In the moment when all seemed lost, the Tyrannosaurus Rex burst through the wall of the visitor center. The Rex had been drawn by the noise and movement. Now it attacked the velociraptors, viewing them as threats to its territory. In the chaos of the battle between dinosaurs, the humans were forgotten. They escaped the building and made their way to the helipad, where Hammond's helicopter was waiting. As they took off, leaving Isla Nublar behind, they looked back at the island. Smoke rose from various locations where fires had broken out. Dinosaurs roamed freely through the ruins of Jurassic Park. Hammond's dream had become a nightmare. The park would never open to the public. The investors pulled their funding immediately, and the Costa Rican government declared the island off-limits. Jurassic Park, after millions of dollars in investment and years of preparation, had existed as a complete park for less than a day before disaster struck. But the dinosaurs remained. On Isla Nublar, and as would soon be discovered, on Isla Sorna as well, populations of dinosaurs continued to live and breed, isolated from the outside world but very much alive. The genie was out of the bottle. Dinosaurs walked the earth once more, and the consequences of that fact would continue to unfold in the years to come. Part 4. The Lost World, 4 years later. Site B revealed, 4 years after the disaster at Jurassic Park, the world had largely forgotten about John Hammond's failed venture. InGen had quietly gone bankrupt, and the islands had been declared a nature preserve by the Costa Rican government. Officially, no humans were allowed to visit, and no dinosaurs were supposed to exist. But rumors persisted. Fishermen reported seeing unusual creatures on Isla Sorna. Occasionally, carcasses of strange animals would wash up on the Costa Rican mainland. The government dismissed these reports, and the public remained largely ignorant of the truth. John Hammond, his health failing and his fortune depleted, had one last mission. He had learned that a team was being assembled to return to Isla Sorna Site B, where the dinosaurs had originally been bred. His nephew, Peter Ludlow, who now controlled InGen, was planning an Asia expedition to capture dinosaurs and bring them to a new park on the mainland. Hammond opposed this plan desperately. He had seen the disaster that resulted from trying to control dinosaurs, and he believed the animals should be left alone on the island. To counter Ludlow's expedition, Hammond organized his own team to document the dinosaurs and build public support for leaving them in peace. Hammond recruited Dr. Ian Malcolm, the chaos theorist who had survived the first park incident. Malcolm wanted nothing to do with dinosaurs ever again, but Hammond convinced him by revealing that Malcolm's girlfriend, Dr. Sarah Harding, had already gone to the island alone to study the animals. Desperate to rescue Sarah, Malcolm assembled a small team and headed to Isla Sorna. The team included Eddie Carr, an equipment specialist and field technician, and Nick Van Owen, a documentary photographer and environmental activist. They arrived on Isla Sorna to find an island very different from Isla Nublar. Where the first island had been a carefully controlled theme park, Isla Sorna was wild. This was where the dinosaurs had been raised before being transported to Jurassic Park, and, after InGen's bankruptcy, the facilities had been abandoned. The dinosaurs had been left to fend for themselves, without the lysine supplements they supposedly needed to survive. Yet the dinosaurs thrived. Not only had they survived, but they had established functioning ecosystems, with herbivores filling the role of prey animals and carnivores maintaining predator populations. Life, once again, had found a way. The dinosaurs had adapted, evolved, and overcome the artificial limitations their creators had tried to impose. Hunters and hunted Malcolm's team found Dr. Harding observing a herd of Stegosaurus. But their reunion was short-lived. Malcolm had brought along an unexpected passenger, his daughter Kelly, who had stowed away in the equipment trailer. Now Malcolm had to worry about keeping his daughter safe in one of the most dangerous places on Earth. The situation became even more complicated when Ludlow's team arrived. Led by a big game hunter named Roland Tembo, the InGen team had brought heavy equipment, including specially modified vehicles and tranquilizer weapons. Their plan was to capture multiple dinosaurs and transport them back to the mainland. The two teams had opposing goals. Malcolm's group wanted to document and protect the dinosaurs. Ludlow's team wanted to capture and exploit them. But both groups were about to discover that their goals mattered very little to the dinosaurs themselves. Ludlow's team set up a base camp and began their hunting operation. They successfully captured numerous dinosaurs, including several Pachycephalosaurus, a Parasaurolophus, and, most significantly, an infant Tyrannosaurus rex. When Malcolm's team learned that the infant rex had been captured and was injured, they made a fateful decision. Nick Van Owen and Sarah Harding sneaked into Ludlow's camp and freed the captured dinosaurs, causing chaos. They also took the infant rex to treat its broken leg, but they had not considered the consequences. Tyrannosaurus rex, like many large predators, are devoted parents. When the infant's cries went unanswered, the parents came looking for it. Malcolm's team had set up in a trailer equipped as a mobile research laboratory. They treated the infant Rex's injury, planning to return it to its parents. But the adult Rexes found the trailer first. The massive predators attacked the trailer, pushing it toward the edge of a cliff. In the chaos, Eddie Carr was killed trying to save the others, and the trailer hung precariously over the cliff edge. The rest of Ludlow's team heard the commotion and came to rescue Malcolm's group, pulling them up from the dangling trailer just before it fell. With Eddie dead and their equipment destroyed, the two teams had no choice but to work together to reach a communications facility on the other side of the island, where they could call for rescue. The long walk. The journey across Isla Sorna became a desperate struggle for survival. The combined group had to travel through miles of jungle, knowing that every rustle of leaves, every distant call could signal a dinosaur encounter. Roland Tembo, the hunter leading Ludlow's team, had his own agenda. He had come to the island not for money, but for the ultimate hunting trophy, a male Tyrannosaurus rex. He had been tracking the male rex, learning its patterns and territory. He carried powerful tranquilizer darts, planning to bring down the massive predator and claim it as his prize. That night, the group made camp in the ruins of an old InGen facility. They tried to remain quiet, knowing that noise could attract predators. But the infant Tyrannosaurus rex, which they had treated earlier, had left its scent on their clothes and equipment. And the parent Rexes were still looking for their baby. The Tyrannosaurs attacked the camp. People scattered into the jungle, and in the chaos, several members of the group were killed. The dinosaurs were not mindless killing machines, they were parents protecting their offspring and defending their territory. But the result was the same. More human lives were lost. The next morning, the survivors continued their trek. They encountered a herd of Parasaurolophus and had to hide as the herd passed. They found evidence of other dinosaurs' track marks, feeding sites, nests. The island was thoroughly populated with thriving populations of multiple species. As they traveled through a field of tall grass, they made a terrible mistake. The grass concealed a pack of velociraptors, smaller than the ones Dr. Grant had encountered on Isla Nublar, but no less dangerous. The raptors attacked, picking off members of the group one by one. People ran in panic, which only made it easier for the predators to hunt them down. Malcolm's daughter Kelly proved her resourcefulness during this attack, using her gymnastics skills to escape a raptor and even managing to kick one out of a building where the survivors had taken refuge. By the time the survivors reached the communications facility, their numbers had been severely reduced. They called for rescue, and a helicopter was dispatched. But Peter Ludlow, Hammond's nephew and the head of InGen, insisted on one final attempt to salvage his project. The tranquilized male Tyrannosaurus rex had been transported to the ship that was waiting offshore. Ludlow wanted to bring it back to the mainland and use it as the centerpiece for a new facility, Jurassic Park, San Diego. San Diego. The ship carrying the captured Tyrannosaurus arrived at the docks in San Diego under mysterious circumstances. The bridge was covered in blood, and the crew was dead or missing. When the ship crashed into the dock, rescuers found the cause of the disaster. The Tyrannosaurus had escaped its containment on the ship and killed everyone aboard. Now, the massive predator was loose in a major American city, disoriented and angry. The Rex wandered through the streets of San Diego, causing panic and destruction. It attacked a bus, crushed cars, and terrified the population. InGen's plan had resulted in catastrophe once again. The company's arrogance and greed had not only led to deaths on the islands, but now threatened civilians on the mainland. Malcolm and Sarah Harding realized they had one chance to recapture the Rex. The infant Tyrannosaurus was still in the mobile research facility. If they could use the infant as bait, they might be able to lure the adult back to the dock and onto the ship. They executed their desperate plan, driving through San Diego with the infant Rex in the back of their vehicle, the adult Rex in pursuit. It was a terrifying chase through city streets with the massive predator close behind them. But the plan worked. They led the Rex onto the ship, where Sarah used tranquilizer darts to sedate it. Peter Ludlow, in a final display of poor judgment, entered the ship's cargo hold to check on the Rex. The tranquilizers were still taking effect, and the Rex, though sluggish, was not fully unconscious. It attacked Ludlow, killing him. Nearby, the infant Rex, learning from its parent, also bit the fallen man. The authorities decided the best course of action was to return the dinosaurs to Isla Sorna and establish a permanent quarantine. The island would be declared a nature preserve, off-limits to humans. The dinosaurs would be allowed to live out their existence without human interference. John Hammond, in his final public statement, urged the world to observe and protect the dinosaurs, but from a distance. He acknowledged that his dream of Jurassic Park had been a mistake, born of hubris and a failure to respect the power of nature. The dinosaurs deserved to exist, he said, but they should exist on their own terms, in their own world. And so Isla Sorna became an isolated preserve, a fragment of the Mesozoic era existing in the modern world. The dinosaurs continued to live, breed, and evolve, separated from humanity by miles of ocean and international law. But the story was far from over. Part 5. Isla Sorna. 8 years of isolation. A forgotten world. For 8 years after the San Diego incident, Isla Sorna remained largely undisturbed. The international community had agreed to leave the island alone, establishing a 5-mile exclusion zone around it. Any ships or aircraft that ventured too close were warned away by the Costa Rican Coast Guard. But the island was not empty. The dinosaur populations continued to grow and evolve, establishing complex ecosystems that existed nowhere else on Earth. Herbivores like Parasaurolophus, Corythosaurus and Ankylosaurus formed herds that migrated across the island, following seasonal patterns of vegetation growth. Carnivores established territories and hunting grounds, with apex predators like Tyrannosaurus rex ruling certain regions while packs of velociraptors dominated others. Life on the island was harsh. Young dinosaurs had high mortality rates, taken by predators or succumbing to disease and starvation. But those that survived to adulthood thrived, growing to sizes that matched or exceeded their prehistoric ancestors. Scientists observed the island from a distance using satellite imagery and occasional aerial surveys. They documented the dinosaur populations, noting changes in behavior and distribution. What they saw was remarkable. The dinosaurs were not just surviving, but adapting to their new environment, developing behaviors that may have been different from their ancient ancestors. The island had effectively become a natural laboratory, demonstrating what might happen if extinct species were reintroduced to a modern ecosystem. The results were both fascinating and concerning. Some species thrived beyond expectations. The pteranodon colony, for instance, established nesting grounds on the island's coastal cliffs and grew to significant numbers. The long-necked sauropods found at the island's vegetation provided abundant food, and several species successfully reproduced. Other species struggled. Some carnivores found it difficult to maintain sustainable population levels, and several smaller species appeared to die out entirely or were reduced to tiny populations. The island also attracted illegal visitors. Poachers came seeking dinosaur eggs or samples of tissue, which could be sold to wealthy collectors or research facilities. These illegal expeditions were dangerous and often ended in death when the poachers encountered the island's predators. The Costa Rican government periodically sent patrols to ensure no one was on the island. But monitoring such a large area was difficult, especially with limited resources. Sometimes weeks or months would pass without any official presence near the island. During this period, the world largely forgot about Isla Sorna. The dramatic events in San Diego had captured public attention for a time, but as months turned to years, other news took precedence. Dinosaurs became yesterday's story, a strange footnote in history that most people rarely thought about. But for those who had experienced the islands firsthand, the survivors of Jurassic Park and the Lost World incident, the dinosaurs were never far from their thoughts. The Kirby Incident. In 2001, 8 years after the original Jurassic Park disaster, a wealthy couple named Paul and Amanda Kirby approached Dr. Alan Grant with an unusual proposition. They claimed to be adventurers who wanted to fly over Isla Sorna in a private plane, taking aerial photographs of the dinosaurs. They were willing to pay Dr. Grant a substantial sum to accompany them as an expert guide. Dr. Grant, whose research funding had been severely limited since the Jurassic Park incident, reluctantly agreed. He had not returned to any of the islands since his harrowing experience in 1993, but his financial situation was desperate, and the Kirbys assured him they would only be flying over the island, not landing. But the Kirbys had lied about their intentions. They were not adventurers. Their son, Eric Kirby, had gone parasailing near Isla Sorna with Amanda's boyfriend, and both had disappeared. Paul and Amanda were desperate parents searching for their child, and they believed Dr. Grant was their best chance of survival if they had to land on the island. When the plane entered Isla Sorna's airspace, The pilot ignored Dr. Grant's protests and descended toward the island. The plan was to fly low and slow, looking for any sign of Eric or his companion. But flying slowly over an island full of territorial predators was a fatal mistake. A flock of pteranodons, the flying reptiles that nested on the island's cliffs, perceived the plane as a threat to their territory. They attacked, tearing into the aircraft's structure and causing it to crash in the jungle. The pilot was killed immediately. Dr. Grant and the Kirbys survived the crash, but they were now stranded on Isla Sorna with no means of communication and no rescue coming. Their only chance was to reach the coast and hope to signal a passing ship. To make matters worse, Dr. Grant quickly realized that the younger Kirbys' deception had put them all in tremendous danger. He was angry at being manipulated, but there was no time for recriminations. Survival was the only priority. The group began moving through the jungle, trying to avoid making noise that might attract predators. But the island was home to species Dr. Grant had never encountered before, including some that had not been present on Isla Nublar. They first encountered a herd of Corythosaurus drinking at a river. The herbivores were skittish but not aggressive, and the group managed to pass without incident. But the noise of the Corythosaurus fleeing attracted a far more dangerous creature, a Spinosaurus. The Spinosaurus was a massive predator, even larger than the Tyrannosaurus rex Dr. Grant had encountered years before. It had not been among the dinosaurs originally on display in Jurassic Park, but InGen's geneticists on Isla Sorna had created several during their breeding experiments. The Spinosaurus attacked with terrifying speed and power. The group ran, but the dinosaur pursued them relentlessly. They took refuge in an old supply truck, but the Spinosaurus tore the truck apart, trying to reach the humans inside. Only by fleeing into dense vegetation did they finally escape the creature. Shaken but alive, the group continued their journey. Dr. Grant, despite his anger at the Kirbys, could not help but be fascinated by what he was seeing. The Spinosaurus represented a species he had never studied in detail, and its behavior was providing new insights into predator intelligence and hunting strategies. That night, they heard a voice calling for help. It was Eric Kirby, alive and alone. The boy had survived for 8 weeks on the island, living in an abandoned water truck and scavenging supplies from InGen's old facilities. He had learned to avoid predators, to move quietly, and to use his wits to stay alive. The reunion between Eric and his parents was emotional, but there was no time to celebrate. They were still deep in the island's interior, and predators were everywhere. They needed to keep moving. As they traveled, they encountered evidence of InGen's research activities. Old buildings, abandoned equipment, and even laboratories full of research notes about dinosaur behavior and biology. Dr. Grant studied these materials when he could, learning more about how the dinosaurs had been created and what behavioral traits had been observed. One discovery was particularly troubling. The velociraptors on Isla Sorna were even more intelligent than the ones Dr. Grant had encountered on Isla Nublar. They had developed complex communication methods, using calls that seemed to convey specific information. They hunted with sophisticated strategies, and they seemed to remember individual humans who had wronged them. This became apparent when the group was stalked by a pack of velociraptors. The raptors didn't attack immediately. Instead, they followed, watched, and waited for the perfect moment to strike. It was clear they were coordinating their movements, communicating with each other about the humans' position and direction of travel. The group managed to evade the raptors by entering an aviary, a massive cage that had once housed flying reptiles. But inside the aviary, they faced a new threat. The pteranodons that nested there were aggressive, defending their territory and their young. These were not the small, harmless creatures often depicted in movies, but large, powerful animals with sharp beaks and strong wings. The group barely escaped the aviary with their lives, emerging battered and terrified. But their ordeal was far from over. The Spinosaurus that had attacked them earlier had followed their trail and was waiting for them outside the aviary. What followed was a desperate chase to a river, where the group hoped to find a boat left behind by InGen workers. The Spinosaurus pursued them into the water, where it proved to be an adept swimmer. Just when it seemed they would be killed, a satellite phone which Eric had scavenged and which Amanda had been carrying rang from inside the Spinosaurus's stomach. The dinosaur had eaten Amanda's boyfriend weeks earlier, and the phone had been calling from inside its digestive system. The ringing sound confused and irritated the Spinosaurus, distracting it long enough for the group to escape. They found an old barge and began floating downriver, hoping it would take them to the coast. But the velociraptors had not given up their hunt. The pack pursued the group, using the riverbank to keep pace with the barge. Dr. Grant realized that the raptors wanted something the group had taken from one of their nests, a pair of eggs that had been accidentally collected along with equipment from an old InGen site. The raptors weren't hunting for food. They were retrieving their young. Understanding this, Dr. Grant returned the eggs to the raptors. The pack accepted the returned eggs and ceased their pursuit, disappearing back into the jungle. It was a remarkable moment, proof that the raptors were not mindless killers, but intelligent creatures with social bonds and protective instincts toward their offspring. The group finally reached the coast and managed to signal for help. A rescue team, alerted by the satellite phone calls and coordinated by Dr. Grant's colleague Billy Brennan, arrived with helicopters and armed escort. They evacuated the survivors just as more dinosaurs, including the persistent Spinosaurus, arrived at the beach. As they flew away from Isla Sorna, Dr. Grant looked back at the island one last time. He saw pteranodons flying free over the ocean, their wings catching the sunlight. The dinosaurs were no longer confined to the islands. They were beginning to spread. The implications were staggering. If the pteranodons could fly to the mainland, what other dinosaurs might find ways to escape? How long before the isolation of Isla Sorna was completely breached? These questions would not be answered for many years. But the seeds of a much larger crisis had been planted. Part 6. The Masrani Era, A New Vision. Simon Masrani and the Dream Reborn. In the years following the Kirby incident, InGen remained a corporation in limbo. The company had valuable assets, its genetic technology, its research data, and, most importantly, its dinosaurs. But it had no clear direction or leadership. Several companies attempted to acquire InGen, but concerns about liability and the ethical implications of owning dinosaur creation technology scared off most potential buyers. In 2005, a solution emerged from an unexpected source. Simon Masrani, the CEO of Masrani Global Corporation, announced his intention to purchase InGen. Masrani was an idealistic entrepreneur who had built his fortune in various industries, from telecommunications to energy. He was also a sincere admirer of John Hammond, who had died the previous year. Masrani believed that Hammond's vision had been sound, but the execution had been flawed. With modern technology, better safety protocols, and proper oversight, Masrani believed that a dinosaur theme park could work. He wanted to fulfill Hammond's dream while honoring his memory. The purchase of InGen was completed in 2005, and Masrani immediately began planning for a new park. This time, there would be no shortcuts, no understaffing, no disgruntled employees with access to critical systems. Every lesson from the failures of Jurassic Park would be learned and applied. Masrani chose Isla Nublar as the location for his new park. The island had been abandoned since 1993, and much of the original infrastructure had deteriorated. But the basic bones of Hammond's Park were still there: the visitor center, the roads, some of the facilities. More importantly, the island was already isolated and had established security perimeters. Over the next 10 years, Masrani Global invested billions of dollars in the new park. They cleared the overgrown vegetation, rebuilt the facilities, and constructed new attractions that Hammond could only have dreamed of. They hired hundreds of employees, from geneticists to veterinarians to security personnel to hospitality staff. They also addressed the security concerns that had doomed the original park. The new park would have redundant systems for everything power, communications, security. They designed containment systems that could withstand the strongest dinosaurs. They established protocols for every conceivable emergency. But most importantly, Masrani wanted to create spectacular attractions that would make the park irresistible to visitors. Hammond had brought back dinosaurs, but Masrani wanted to push the technology even further. He wanted to create new dinosaurs, hybrid creatures that combined traits from multiple species to create attractions that would thrill audiences. The birth of Jurassic World. In 2005, Jurassic World officially opened its gates to the public. The park was an immediate success, attracting millions of visitors in its first year. Families came from around the world to see living dinosaurs, to ride in specially designed vehicles that brought them safely through dinosaur habitats, to watch feeding demonstrations and educational shows. The park featured numerous attractions. The gyrosphere was a personal favorite. Guests could ride in transparent, hamster ball-like vehicles through valleys where herbivorous dinosaurs roamed freely. The Mosasaurus feeding show drew enormous crowds, with a massive marine reptile leaping from its lagoon to catch a shark suspended over the water. There were petting zoos, where children could interact with baby dinosaurs, hotels with views overlooking the park, and restaurants where guests could dine while watching dinosaurs graze nearby. For 10 years, Jurassic World operated without major incident. There were occasional problems. Dinosaurs became ill. Containment fences needed repair. Tourists did foolish things, but no disasters on the scale of the original park. The safety protocols worked. The redundant systems prevented catastrophic failures. The park's success led to complacency. As years passed without serious incident, the sense of danger diminished. The dinosaurs became normalized, just another attraction in a world full of entertainment options. Attendance growth began to slow. To maintain public interest, the park's geneticists, working in a state-of-the-art facility called the Hammond Creation Lab, began developing hybrid dinosaurs. These were not natural species, but combinations of different dinosaur DNA mixed with DNA from modern animals. The goal was to create dinosaurs that were bigger, more impressive, and more exciting than anything that had ever existed in nature. The park's flagship creation was the Indominus Rex. This creature was a genetic hybrid incorporating DNA from multiple species, including Tyrannosaurus rex, Velociraptor, Giganotosaurus, Rugops, and several modern animals including cuttlefish and tree frogs. The genetic mixing gave the Indominus unique abilities. It could regulate its body temperature. To hide from thermal sensors, it could change its skin color for partial camouflage, and it had the intelligence of the highly cunning raptors. But the creation of the Indominus Rex was a catastrophic mistake, one that would make all the previous park disasters seem minor by comparison. The Indominus had been raised in isolation, with minimal contact with other dinosaurs or with humans. This prevented it from developing normal social behaviors. It was intelligent enough to understand it was being contained, and it was curious about the world beyond its paddock walls. It was also aggressive, having killed its own sibling in combat when both were juveniles. In 2015, with the Indominus nearly grown, the park prepared to unveil it as a new attraction. But during a routine inspection of the paddock, the Indominus demonstrated just how intelligent it truly was. It used its ability to regulate body temperature to hide from thermal cameras, then clawed marks on the walls of its paddock to make handlers believe it had escaped. When handlers entered the paddock to investigate, the Indominus attacked. It had been waiting, patient and clever, for exactly this opportunity. It killed one handler immediately and nearly killed another. Then, with the paddock gate open, the Indominus escaped into the park. What followed was chaos. Part 7. Jurassic World, the Indominus Crisis Escape and Hunt. The escape of the Indominus Rex triggered all of Jurassic World's emergency protocols. Asset containment unit teams were deployed to track and recapture the creature. These teams were led by Owen Grady, a former Navy man who had spent years working with the park's velociraptors, training them and studying their behavior. Owen had established a rapport with 4 raptors: Blue, Charlie, Delta, and Echo. Through intensive training, he had taught them to respond to commands, though he was always aware that they were not pets or allies, but dangerous predators that tolerated him as the alpha of their pack. Owen tried to warn the park's operations manager, Claire Deering, about the danger the Indominus represented. But Claire, like many in the park's administration, viewed the dinosaurs primarily as assets and attractions rather than as animals. She believed the ACU teams could handle the situation quickly and quietly, minimizing disruption to park operations. She was catastrophically wrong. The ACU team tracked the Indominus into the jungle using thermal sensors and aerial surveillance. But the Indominus, with its ability to regulate body temperature and its chameleon-like camouflage, ambushed them. The containment team was slaughtered, their weapons useless against the hybrid's armor-like hide and tremendous strength. The Indominus was not hunting for food. It was killing for sport, for the joy of hunting, perhaps to establish dominance in this new territory it had claimed. This was a behavior the geneticists had not anticipated, a result of mixing predatory DNA from multiple species without understanding how those traits would interact. As the body count rose, Simon Masrani himself took control of the response. He boarded a helicopter with an armed team, determined to hunt down and kill the Indominus before it could reach areas where guests were present. But the Indominus had wandered into the aviary, the enormous enclosure where pteranodons and dimorphodons were housed. When the helicopter entered the aviary in pursuit, it disturbed the flying reptiles. The panicked pterosaurs swarmed the helicopter, smashing into its rotors and windows. The helicopter crashed inside the aviary, exploding on impact. Simon Masrani, the idealistic entrepreneur who had wanted to fulfill Hammond's dream, died in the flames. The crash tore a hole in the aviary's dome. The pterosaurs, seeing open sky for the first time since their captivity began, flew free. They descended on the park's crowded main plaza, attacking tourists and staff indiscriminately. People ran screaming, trying to find shelter as the flying reptiles swooped and dove, their sharp beaks and talons drawing blood. Chaos consumed Jurassic World. The park's carefully maintained image of safety and control shattered in minutes. Thousands of tourists found themselves trapped on an island with escaped dinosaurs, and no one seemed to know how to fix the situation. Desperate measures. With Masrani dead, control of the park's response fell to Vic Hoskins, the head of InGen's security division. Hoskins had his own agenda. He had long believed that dinosaurs could be militarized, trained, and used as weapons in combat situations. He saw the Indominus crisis as an opportunity to demonstrate this concept. Hoskins convinced Owen to use his raptors to hunt the Indominus. The raptors, Hoskins argued, were the perfect trackers. They could follow the Indominus's scent and locate it far more effectively than any human team. Once found, the hybrid could be killed by military forces standing by. Owen reluctantly agreed, though he harbored serious doubts about using the raptors this way. He knew they were intelligent and independent-minded. Using them as tools was dangerous. The raptors were released and immediately picked up the Indominus's trail. They ran through the jungle with Owen and a military team following in vehicles. For a while, the plan seemed to work. The raptors were focused, following the scent with the precision of bloodhounds. But then the raptors found the Indominus, and something unexpected happened. The hybrid began communicating with them, using vocalizations similar to raptor calls. The Indominus had raptor DNA as part of its genetic makeup, and it was using that shared heritage to establish itself as the raptor's new alpha. The raptors turned on the humans, attacking the military team. Owen barely escaped with his life. The raptors, once trained and obedient, were now hunting him alongside the Indominus. Hoskins's plan had backfired spectacularly, and now the situation was even worse than before. The park had not one escaped hybrid predator, but 5. Meanwhile, Claire Deering had her own crisis to manage. Her nephews, Zach and Gray Mitchell, had been visiting the park and were now lost somewhere in the restricted zones. Claire and Owen set out to find them, navigating through a park that had become a war zone. They found the boys at the ruins of the original Jurassic Park Visitor Center. The abandoned building still stood in the jungle, a monument to Hammond's failed dream. The boys had taken refuge there after escaping the Indominus in a gyrosphere. They had been lucky to survive. As the group reunited and began making their way back to the main park area, they were pursued by the raptors. The intelligent predators tracked them through the jungle, and it seemed certain they would be killed. But Owen managed to re-establish his connection with the raptors, particularly with Blue, the most intelligent and independent of the four. The raptors faced a choice: continue following the Indominus, or return their loyalty to Owen. It was Blue who made the decision, breaking away from the Indominus's influence and attacking the hybrid. The other raptors followed Blue's lead, but the Indominus was far larger and stronger than the raptors. It killed Charlie and Delta almost immediately and wounded Echo severely. Only Blue survived, but even she was no match for the hybrid's strength. The final battle. As the Indominus cornered Owen, Claire, and her nephews in the main plaza, with Blue incapacitated and unable to help, Claire had a desperate idea. She remembered the Tyrannosaurus Rex that had been kept in the park since its opening, the same Rex that had attacked the original park's tour vehicles in 1993, now over 20 years old but still massive and powerful. Claire ran to the T-Rex paddock and opened the gates, using a flare to lure the ancient predator toward the plaza. The Tyrannosaurus followed, attracted by the movement and the light. When it saw the Indominus, territorial instinct took over. The two massive predators collided with earth-shaking force. They were evenly matched in size and strength, but the T-Rex had experience and battle scars from decades of life as an alpha predator. The Indominus had youth and genetic enhancements, plus the intelligence of raptor DNA. They fought savagely, biting and clawing, smashing through buildings and vehicles. The humans could only watch and try to stay out of the way as tons of muscle and rage battled for dominance. The fight seemed to tilt in the Indominus's favor. The hybrid was gaining the upper hand, forcing the T-Rex back toward the Mosasaurus lagoon. But then Blue, recovered from her injuries, rejoined the fight. The raptor attacked the Indominus from behind, distracting it at a crucial moment. The T-Rex seized the opportunity, slamming the Indominus toward the edge of the lagoon. The hybrid's feet skidded on the wet pavement, and it fell backward into the water. The Mosasaurus, the massive marine reptile that had been contained in the lagoon for years, detected the disturbance. It surged up from the depths and seized the Indominus in its enormous jaws, dragging the hybrid down into the water. The Indominus struggled briefly, then disappeared beneath the surface. It was over. The crisis had ended, but the cost had been enormous. Evacuation and aftermath Jurassic World was evacuated immediately. Thousands of tourists were ferried by boat and helicopter to the mainland. The park would never reopen. The dream of a safe dinosaur theme park, revived by Simon Masrani and finally achieved for 10 successful years, was dead once again. Vic Hoskins did not survive to see the evacuation. He had remained at the park's genetics facility, attempting to steal genetic samples and research data about the Indominus and the raptors. He still believed dinosaurs could be weaponized, and he wanted to secure the technology before the park was abandoned. But Delta, one of the raptors, found him in the laboratory. His last moments were spent realizing that the creatures he wanted to weaponize were far too dangerous to ever control. Owen and Claire remained on the island until the last tourists were evacuated. Blue, the sole surviving raptor, disappeared into the jungle. Owen released her rather than allow her to be captured and contained. She had earned her freedom, he believed, and she had saved their lives. As the last helicopters left Isla Nublar, the island fell silent. The dinosaurs remained the Tyrannosaurus, the herbivores in their enclosures, the pterosaurs that had not been recaptured, and countless other species that wandered the island. But there were no more humans to feed them, maintain their fences, or manage their populations. The dinosaurs would have to adapt to survival on an island without human support, and they would have to do so quickly, because another crisis was approaching, one that would threaten not just the park, but every dinosaur that existed. Deep in the ocean, beneath Isla Nublar, volcanic activity was increasing. The island sat atop an active volcanic system that had been dormant for many years. But geological surveys would soon reveal that the volcano was becoming active again. Within a few years, it would erupt, and when it did, every dinosaur on Isla Nublar would die unless they were evacuated. The question of what to do about the dinosaurs, these creatures that had caused so much death and destruction, but were also magnificent and irreplaceable, would become a global controversy. And the decisions made in response to that question would change the world forever. Part 8. The Volcano and the Auction, 3 years later. The eruption approaches. 3 years after Jurassic World's collapse, the world had moved on. The disaster had been massive news for a time, spawning investigations, lawsuits, and intense debate about the ethics of genetic engineering. Several countries banned dinosaur cloning entirely. InGen was dissolved, its assets seized by the courts. The surviving members of Masrani Global's board tried to distance themselves from the catastrophe. But on Isla Nublar, the dinosaurs continued to live, unaware that their time was running out. Volcanic activity beneath the island had been steadily increasing since 2016. Geologists monitoring the situation predicted that Mount Sibo, the volcano at the island's center, would erupt within the next few years. When that happened, the explosion and resulting lava flows would cover most of the island, killing everything on it. This raised an uncomfortable moral question. Should humans intervene to save the dinosaurs, or should they let nature take its course? After all, dinosaurs had gone extinct once before, 65 million years ago. Perhaps they were simply not meant to exist in the modern world. The debate divided the public. Some argued that the dinosaurs deserved protection as living creatures, regardless of how they came to exist. They were endangered species, in fact. They were the most endangered species possible, as many of them existed in populations of only a handful of individuals. Letting them die would be a moral failure. Others argued that the dinosaurs were dangerous aberrations, genetic mistakes that had already caused numerous human deaths. The Ado world would be safer with them gone. The volcano provided a natural solution to a problem that humans had created through hubris and greed. The U.S. government convened hearings to decide whether to mount a rescue operation. Dr. Ian Malcolm was called to testify. Now, older and having survived 3 separate dinosaur incidents, Malcolm argued passionately against saving the dinosaurs. He pointed out that the creatures had been given a second chance at existence and had proven to be incompatible with the modern world. Letting them die on Isla Nublar would finally close the chapter on humanity's failed experiment with genetic resurrection. The government agreed with Malcolm's position. No rescue operation would be mounted. The dinosaurs would be allowed to die in the volcanic eruption. But not everyone accepted this decision. The Lockwood estate Claire Deering, the former operations manager of Jurassic World, had formed an advocacy group called the Dinosaur Protection Group. Claire had been changed by her experiences on Isla Nublar. She no longer saw dinosaurs as assets or attractions, but as living creatures deserving of protection. Her organization lobbied for dinosaur rights and worked to preserve genetic samples and data that could be used to study the creatures, even if they went extinct again. When the government decided not to rescue the dinosaurs, Claire began looking for private alternatives. She found one in an unexpected place, Benjamin Lockwood, John Hammond's former partner. Few people knew that Hammond had not created InGen alone. In the early days, he had worked with Lockwood, a wealthy investor who had provided crucial funding and support. But the two men had parted ways years before Jurassic Park opened, due to a disagreement over the ethical boundaries of genetic technology. Lockwood was now elderly and in poor health, confined to his estate in Northern California. But he had never stopped caring about dinosaurs. Through his estate manager, Eli Mills, Lockwood contacted Claire and offered to fund a private rescue operation. He would provide ships, equipment, and money to transport dinosaurs from Isla Nublar before the volcano erupted. Claire accepted immediately. She assembled a team, including Owen Grady, who initially refused to participate, but changed his mind when he learned that Blue, the raptor he had trained, was still alive on the island. The team also included a dinosaur veterinarian, a computer technician, and several other specialists. They departed for Isla Nublar in early 2018, racing against time as volcanic activity increased. The plan was to capture as many dinosaurs as possible, with priority given to species that existed in small numbers. They would be transported to a new sanctuary Lockwood had established, where they could live in safety. But Claire and Owen had been deceived. Eli Mills, Lockwood's estate manager, was not interested in creating a sanctuary. He had his own plan, one that would make him wealthy, beyond imagination, while endangering the entire world. Betrayal on Isla Nublar. Claire's team arrived on Isla Nublar to find that Mills had already sent a mercenary team to the island. These were not animal rescue specialists, but military contractors led by a cold-blooded professional named Ken Wheatley. They had heavy equipment, tranquilizer weapons, and transport vehicles. They were clearly prepared for a major operation. Mills explained that the scale of the rescue required more resources than Claire had anticipated. He had arranged for the mercenaries to help capture and transport the dinosaurs. Claire had doubts, but with the volcano becoming increasingly active, there was no time to question the arrangement. The team split up. Owen went in search of Blue, while Claire's group worked with the mercenaries to capture other dinosaurs. They successfully tranquilized several species, including a baryonyx and numerous herbivores. Meanwhile, the volcano's eruption was imminent. The ground shook with increasing frequency, and pyroclastic flows began streaming down the mountain's slopes. The team had to work fast. Owen found Blue in the jungle. The raptor recognized him immediately, and for a moment it seemed they had re-established their bond. But Wheatley and his mercenaries followed Owen's tracker signal. They saw Blue not as a creature to be rescued, but as a valuable asset to be captured. When Wheatley tried to tranquilize Blue, she attacked, and in the chaos, Blue was shot. Owen tried to help the wounded raptor, but Wheatley's team tranquilized Owen as well. They loaded both Owen and Blue onto a transport vehicle, leaving them to be evacuated with the other captured dinosaurs. At that moment, Mount Sibo erupted in full fury. Lava exploded from the summit, and pyroclastic flows superheated clouds of gas and ash raced down the mountainside at hundreds of miles per hour. Everything in their path was instantly incinerated. The dinosaurs panicked. Herbivores ran in stampeding herds, desperate to escape the destruction. The Tyrannosaurus rex, now even older but still powerful, fled alongside smaller dinosaurs. Pterosaurs took flight, circling in confusion as ash filled the air. Claire and her teammate Franklin Webb were trapped in a bunker as lava flowed around it, sealing them inside. The temperature rose to unbearable levels. Just when it seemed they would be cooked alive, the bunker's emergency hatch was activated by gyroscope technician Zia Rodriguez, flooding the chamber with seawater from the underground tunnel system. They barely escaped, swimming through underwater passages as the island collapsed around them. Owen regained consciousness aboard a ship, which was carrying the captured dinosaurs away from the doomed island. Looking back, he saw Isla Nublar consumed by lava and ash. A brachiosaurus stood on the dock, calling out in distress, unable to escape as the pyroclastic flow engulfed it. It was the last living image of dinosaurs on Isla Nublar. The island that had been home to Hammond's original park and later to Jurassic World was now lifeless, buried under volcanic rock. Every dinosaur that had not been captured had perished. But Owen quickly realized that the dinosaurs on the ship were not being taken to a sanctuary. This was not a rescue operation. It was a heist. The Lockwood Auction. The ship did not take the captured dinosaurs to a nature preserve or sanctuary. Instead, it docked at the Lockwood Estate in California. The dinosaurs were unloaded into the estate's underground facilities, a massive complex of tunnels, cages, and chambers that had been designed specifically to house them. Owen, Claire, and their teammates were imprisoned when they tried to intervene. From their cell, they pieced together what was actually happening. Eli Mills had betrayed Lockwood. He had used the old man's money and resources to mount a dinosaur capture operation, but not to save them. Mills planned to auction off the dinosaurs to the highest bidders' weapons dealers, warlords, private collectors, and anyone else with enough money. The auction would be held that very evening, in a secret gathering of the world's wealthiest and most ruthless individuals. Each captured dinosaur would be sold, generating hundreds of millions of dollars. The buyers would take the dinosaurs anywhere they wanted, with no oversight or control. But Mills had something even more valuable to sell than the captured dinosaurs. Dr. Henry Wu, the geneticist who had created the dinosaurs for Hammond and later for Jurassic World, had continued his research. He had created a new hybrid, the Indoraptor. The Indoraptor was a smaller, more refined version of the Indominus rex. It combined Indominus DNA with more raptor traits, creating a creature that was intelligent, agile, and designed to respond to a laser targeting system. The idea was that a handler could point a laser at a target and the Indoraptor would attack on command. In essence, Mills and Wu had created a weaponized dinosaur, exactly what Vic Hoskins had wanted years earlier. The Indoraptor was the ultimate military asset, a living weapon that could be sold to the highest bidder. There was one problem. Wu had created the Indoraptor prototype using DNA samples from various sources, but it was unstable and highly aggressive. Wu needed more refined DNA to create a stable version specifically. DNA from Blue, the raptor that had demonstrated high intelligence and the ability to follow complex commands. That was why Blue had been so important to capture. She was the key to creating stable, controllable hybrid dinosaurs that could be mass-produced and sold as weapons. The Indoraptor escapes. The auction began with enormous bidding for the captured dinosaurs. A Ankylosaurus sold for millions. A juvenile Allosaurus went for even more. But when the Indoraptor was unveiled, the bidding reached unprecedented levels. Buyers from around the world competed frantically for the chance to own this ultimate weapon. Owen, Claire, and their teammates had escaped their cell and were trying to disrupt the auction and free the dinosaurs. They triggered a Stygimoloch, a small dinosaur with a thick, domed skull, which rampaged through the auction hall, breaking up the gathering and causing chaos. In the confusion, someone accidentally activated the Indoraptor's containment system, opening its cage. The hybrid, unstable and aggressive, was now loose in the Lockwood estate. What followed was a nightmare. The Indoraptor stalked through the mansion, hunting the humans inside. It was more intelligent than any predator that had existed in nature, capable of problem-solving and tactical thinking. It learned to open doors, to track prey through the building, and to coordinate its attacks for maximum effect. The hybrid cornered Owen and Claire in a bedroom, then pursued them onto the roof of the mansion. It seemed certain they would be killed. But Blue, who had been freed from the facility and was recovering from her injury, arrived to help. The two raptors, the natural dinosaur and the artificial hybrid, fought on the mansion's roof. The Indoraptor was stronger and larger, but Blue was faster and fighting to protect Owen. In the end, it was not Blue who killed the Indoraptor, but the mansion itself. The fight caused a glass roof panel to break, and the Indoraptor fell through, impaling itself on the horns of a Triceratops skeleton displayed in the mansion's entry hall below. The immediate threat was over, but a new crisis had emerged. The fighting had damaged the mansion's heating system, and hydrogen cyanide gas was leaking into the underground facility, where the captured dinosaurs were still caged. The dinosaurs would all die from the gas unless someone opened the facility's doors and let them escape. But opening the doors would release the dinosaurs into Northern California, potentially endangering millions of people. Claire stood at the control panel, her hand hovering over the release button, unable to make the decision. In the end, the choice was made by Maisie Lockwood, Benjamin Lockwood's granddaughter. Or rather, as was revealed during the night's events, she was not his granddaughter at all, but a clone of his daughter, who had died years earlier. Maisie, herself a form of genetic resurrection, could not let the dinosaurs die. She pressed the release button. The doors opened. The dinosaurs fled into the night, escaping into the Northern California wilderness and beyond. Part 9. Dinosaurs Among Us. The New World. The diaspora begins. The release of the captured dinosaurs from the Lockwood estate marked a turning point in human history. For the first time, dinosaurs were not confined to remote islands or controlled facilities. They were loose in the world, free to roam wherever they chose. The immediate aftermath was chaotic. Law enforcement and animal control agencies responded to the Lockwood estate, but most of the dinosaurs had already dispersed. Some remained in the nearby forests, while others traveled further afield, following instincts that drew them to suitable habitats. A stegosaurus was spotted in a suburban neighborhood. Pteranodons flew over major cities. A pack of Compsognathus small, chicken-sized predators was discovered living in a golf course. Within days, dinosaur sightings were being reported across the western United States. The government declared a state of emergency. The Department of Fish and Wildlife, working with military forces, attempted to recapture the escaped dinosaurs. But they were facing creatures that were both numerous and spread across a vast territory. Some dinosaurs were successfully tranquilized and captured. Others evaded capture, hiding in forests, mountains, and other wilderness areas. The largest and most dangerous dinosaurs attracted the most attention. The Tyrannosaurus rex from Isla Nublar was spotted in Nevada, drawn to an area with large game animals that it recognized as potential prey. Velociraptors were reported in multiple locations, with unconfirmed rumors that they were beginning to breed in the wild. The Mosasaurus, which had escaped its lagoon when Jurassic World was evacuated, was now living in the Pacific Ocean. Fishing boats reported encounters with the massive marine reptile, which seemed to be hunting whales and large sharks. The creature posed a serious threat to maritime traffic, but capturing or killing something that large in the open ocean proved nearly impossible. Global impact. Within months, the dinosaur situation had evolved from a localized crisis to a global phenomenon. Some of the escaped dinosaurs had been captured not by authorities, but by private individuals, collectors, researchers, or simply opportunists who saw profit in owning a dinosaur. These captured dinosaurs entered the black market. Despite international laws banning the trade in dinosaurs, a lucrative smuggling network developed. Dinosaurs were transported to buyers around the world, often in terrible conditions that resulted in injury or death to the animals. Some wealthy individuals created private collections, keeping dinosaurs on their estates in secret facilities. Others sought to profit from the creatures more directly, using them as attractions in underground fighting rings or private zoos. The most concerning development was the continued interest in weaponizing dinosaurs. Dr. Wu had escaped capture at the Lockwood estate, taking with him genetic samples and research data. Intelligence agencies believed he was working for a foreign power or private military contractor, continuing his hybrid research in a secret laboratory somewhere in the world. The potential for hybrid dinosaurs to be used as weapons of war or terror kept governments on edge. Task forces were established to track Wu and prevent the creation of new hybrids. But Wu was brilliant and elusive, and tracking him proved difficult. In the wild, the escaped dinosaurs were adapting to their new environments in unexpected ways. The herbivores found that many modern plants were suitable food sources, despite being different from the vegetation of the Mesozoic era. Some species thrived, while others struggled to find appropriate habitats. The carnivores proved highly adaptable. Velociraptors began hunting deer and other large mammals. Smaller predators like Compsognathus formed packs that could take down sheep and cattle. Pteranodons nested on coastal cliffs and fed on fish, competing with seabirds for resources. Inevitably, there were conflicts with humans. People were attacked by predatory dinosaurs. Livestock was killed. Property was damaged. The question of how to coexist with dinosaurs became one of the most pressing issues of the age. The debate over coexistence society split into factions over how to handle the dinosaur crisis. Some advocated for aggressive hunting and elimination of all dinosaurs, arguing that they were too dangerous to coexist with. Others called for protection and conservation, insisting that dinosaurs deserved to live and that humans had a responsibility to preserve them. The Dinosaur Protection Group, still led by Claire Deering, worked to create sanctuaries where dinosaurs could live safely away from human populations. They purchased land in remote areas and worked with governments to establish protected zones. But funding was limited, and many dinosaurs remained outside these sanctuaries. Ranchers and farmers in areas with high dinosaur populations demanded government action. They had lost livestock to predators and couldn't afford to continue absorbing the losses. Some took matters into their own hands, hunting and killing dinosaurs that threatened their livelihood. This led to legal battles over whether dinosaurs were protected animals or dangerous pests. Different jurisdictions reached different conclusions, creating a patchwork of laws that was difficult to enforce. The entertainment industry quickly capitalized on the dinosaur phenomenon. Documentaries about living dinosaurs became hugely popular. Reality shows followed dinosaur trackers and rescue workers. Movies dramatized encounters between humans and dinosaurs, though the reality was often more complex and less dramatic than Hollywood depicted. Scientists studied the escaped dinosaurs intensely, learning more about dinosaur biology and behavior than had ever been possible from fossils alone. They documented how dinosaurs moved, communicated, raised their young, and interacted with modern ecosystems. It was a golden age for paleontology, though one born of crisis. 4 years of adaptation. By 2022, 4 years after the Lockwood Estate incident, a new status quo had emerged. Dinosaurs were now a permanent part of the modern world. They existed in wilderness areas, in sanctuaries, in captivity, and on the black market. The initial panic had given way to a wary acceptance. Certain regions became known for their dinosaur populations. Parts of Nevada and California had established dinosaur zones, where the creatures were known to roam freely. Tourists could take guided tours to see dinosaurs in the wild, though always with the understanding that these were dangerous animals that could not be completely controlled. The technology for tracking and managing dinosaurs had improved significantly. GPS tags allowed wildlife officials to monitor the movements of larger specimens. Drone surveillance provided early warning when dinosaurs approached human settlements. Fencing and barrier systems were developed that could withstand even the largest dinosaurs. But challenges remained. The dinosaur population continued to grow. Breeding populations of several species had been confirmed in the wild, meaning the dinosaur presence was self-sustaining rather than just the remnant of the Lockwood escapees. Dr. Wu's whereabouts remained unknown, though his work continued to cast a shadow over the dinosaur situation. Intelligence suggested he had created additional hybrids, though details were scarce and unconfirmed. The Dinosaur Protection Group had evolved into a major international organization, with offices around the world and a budget in the hundreds of millions. Claire Deering had become one of the most recognizable advocates for dinosaur rights, though she faced constant criticism from those who blamed her for the crisis. Owen Grady continued to work with raptors, using his unique understanding of these intelligent predators to help manage wild populations and prevent conflicts with humans. He maintained contact with Blue, who lived in the wild with a small pack of raptors she had formed. Blue had become something of a legend, the original Jurassic World raptor, survivor of multiple crises, now living free as her kind was meant to. The world had changed fundamentally. Humans were no longer the only highly intelligent species on the planet. They shared their world with creatures from a vanished age, and somehow they had to learn to coexist. But the story was not over. The consequences of genetic resurrection were still unfolding, and one final crisis was approaching, one that would determine whether dinosaurs and humans could truly share the same world. Part 10. The Final Crisis. The Amber Mines. The Revelation. In 2022, a new company emerged with ambitious plans related to dinosaurs. Biosyn Genetics, a rival of InGen from the original days of dinosaur cloning, had acquired a remote valley in the Italian Dolomites. There, in an isolated facility, the company claimed to be studying dinosaurs in an effort to develop new pharmaceutical compounds and biotechnology applications. The company's CEO, Dr. Louis Dodgson, presented Biosyn as a responsible steward of genetic technology, learning from InGen's mistakes and using dinosaurs for the benefit of humanity. Biosyn had even created a sanctuary valley where herbivorous dinosaurs could live in a protected environment. But this public image concealed darker activities. Biosyn was not just studying dinosaurs, they were creating new ones, pushing genetic engineering to extremes that made even InGen's work seem conservative by comparison. Moreover, Biosyn had obtained something that should not have existed: the original canister of stolen embryos that Dennis Nedry had taken from Jurassic Park in 1993. The canister had been recovered from Isla Nublar before the volcanic eruption, and had somehow made its way into Biosyn's possession. This gave the company access to pure genetic samples from Hammond's original dinosaurs, before any of InGen's modifications and breeding programs. Dr. Henry Wu was working for Biosyn, continuing his hybrid research in their advanced genetics laboratory. He had reached the culmination of his work, the creation of stable hybrid dinosaurs that could be controlled and, theoretically, mass-produced. But Wu had also made another discovery, one that troubled him deeply. Biosyn was using dinosaur genetics for more than just creating new dinosaurs. They were experimenting with applications that could impact global food supplies, potentially giving Biosyn control over agriculture worldwide. The extent of Biosyn's activities came to light when a swarm of genetically modified locusts appeared in the Midwestern United States. These locusts were massive, far larger than natural species, and they were devouring crops with devastating efficiency. Analysis revealed that the locusts had been genetically altered using prehistoric DNA. Biosyn was using prehistoric genetics not just to create dinosaurs, but to develop genetically engineered organisms that could be deployed as weapons or tools of economic control. The locusts were programmed to destroy crops from Biosyn's competitors, while leaving Biosyn's genetically modified crops untouched. This was genetic engineering on a scale, and with implications that made even the creation of dinosaurs seem small by comparison. If Biosyn could control the world's food supply, they would have power unprecedented in human history. The rescue mission, Dr. Ellie Sattler, the paleobotanist who had survived the original Jurassic Park disaster nearly 3 decades earlier, was investigating the locust outbreak. She traced the insect's origin to biosyn and contacted Dr. Alan Grant, her former colleague and friend. Together, they realized they needed to infiltrate biosyn's facility and gather evidence of the company's illegal activities. They recruited Dr. Ian Malcolm, who was now working as a lecturer at biosyn, unaware of the company's darker activities. Malcolm helped arrange for Sattler and Grant to visit the biosyn Sanctuary Valley under the pretense of academic research. Meanwhile, Claire Deering and Owen Grady became involved through a different route. Maisie Lockwood, the clone of Benjamin Lockwood's daughter, had been living with them in hiding since the Lockwood estate incident. But Maisie had been kidnapped by agents working for biosyn, who wanted to study her unique genetic makeup. Maisie was not just any clone. She had been created using modified cloning technology that prevented genetic defects that normally plagued clones. This technology had huge implications for human genetic medicine, and, perhaps more importantly for biosyn's purposes, for creating stable hybrid dinosaurs. Owen and Claire traveled to the biosyn facility to rescue Maisie, not knowing that they would be reunited with the survivors from the original Jurassic Park incident. Inside Biosyn Valley. The Biosyn Valley was a marvel of biotechnology and ecological engineering. The company had created a functioning ecosystem where dinosaurs of various species lived in relative harmony. Herbivores grazed on carefully cultivated vegetation, while carnivores hunted them in a managed predator-prey relationship. But this was not a nature preserve. It was a laboratory on a massive scale, where every aspect of the dinosaurs' lives was monitored, studied, and controlled. Biosyn was gathering data on dinosaur behavior, biology, and genetics that would fuel decades of research and commercial applications. The valley also housed biosyn's main research facility, a high-tech campus built into the mountains. Here, Dr. Wu and a team of geneticists worked in laboratories full of cutting-edge equipment, creating new organisms and refining the techniques of genetic engineering. When Owen and Claire arrived in pursuit of Maisie, they found themselves in a vast complex teeming with dinosaurs. Some species were familiar from Jurassic World, but others were new, either species that had never been successfully cloned before, or hybrids created by Wu's ongoing experiments. They also encountered Blue, Owen's raptor, who had somehow found her way to the valley. More surprisingly, Blue had an offspring, a young raptor that Owen named Beta. Blue had reproduced asexually, a trait inherited from the genetic modifications made to the original dinosaurs. Owen was now trying to protect not just Blue, but her child as well. Dr. Sattler and Dr. Grant, meanwhile, had infiltrated the main facility with Dr. Malcolm's help. They discovered the evidence they needed: records of biosyn's illegal genetic experiments, including the creation of the modified locusts. They copied the data, planning to expose biosyn's activities to the world. But they were discovered before they could escape. Dodgson, the biosyn CEO, confronted them. He tried to justify his actions, claiming that biosyn was advancing human knowledge and capability. The locusts, he insisted, were a necessary step toward solving global food shortages. In reality, Dodgson was motivated by profit and power. He saw genetic engineering as a tool for corporate domination, not scientific advancement. He had recreated Hammond's fundamental mistake using genetic technology without proper consideration of the consequences. The containment breach. As the various groups converged on the biosyn facility, a catastrophic failure occurred. The modified locusts, which had been breeding in containment facilities within the complex, escaped. They swarmed through the valley, their huge numbers blocking out the sun. The locusts were attracted to heat and flames, a trait that had been engineered into them for purposes of targeting and control. When they encountered the facility's generators and electrical systems, they caused massive fires throughout the complex. The fires spread rapidly, threatening to consume the entire valley. The dinosaurs, sensing the danger, panicked. Containment systems failed as power was lost throughout the facility. Dinosaurs that had been kept in separate enclosures were suddenly free to roam wherever they chose. What followed was chaos on a scale even greater than the Jurassic World disaster. Predators hunted through corridors full of fleeing humans. Herbivores stampeded through laboratories and living quarters. The carefully controlled ecosystem biosyn had created collapsed into violent disorder. Dr. Wu, witnessing the disaster, made a crucial decision. He released data that would allow other scientists to replicate the genetic modification that had allowed Maisie to be successfully cloned. This technology could be used to create stable hybrid dinosaurs and potentially to treat genetic diseases in humans. But more immediately, Wu used the technology to modify Blue's offspring, Beta. The young raptor could now serve as a genetic template for creating healthy hybrid dinosaurs, eliminating the need for capturing and experimenting on the original dinosaurs. This act of sharing the technology freely rather than keeping it proprietary was Wu's attempt at redemption. He had spent decades creating dinosaurs and hybrids for profit and pride. Now, at the end, he wanted his work to benefit everyone rather than serving as a tool for corporate control. Escape and resolution. The survivors, Owen, Claire, Maisie, Grant, Sattler, Malcolm, and others, fought their way through the burning facility. They encountered numerous dinosaurs, both familiar species and new hybrids created by biosyn. One of the most harrowing encounters was with a pack of atrociraptors, a species of raptor, that had been cloned and trained by biosyn for use as tracking animals. These raptors were even more aggressive than the velociraptors, and they pursued the survivors through the facility with terrifying determination. The group also faced the Giganotosaurus, an enormous predator that Wu had cloned as a demonstration of biosyn's capabilities. The Giganotosaurus rivaled the Tyrannosaurus rex in size and power, and it saw the fleeing humans as potential prey. In a dramatic confrontation, the Giganotosaurus encountered the valley's Tyrannosaurus rex, the same rex from Isla Nublar and Jurassic World, now in its late 30s, but still powerful. The two massive predators fought, with the Giganotosaurus initially dominating due to its size and strength. But the rex received unexpected help. A Therizinosaurus, a bizarre dinosaur with enormous claws that normally fed on vegetation, joined the fight. The two dinosaurs working together managed to kill the Giganotosaurus, allowing the humans to escape. The survivors evacuated the facility just as it was consumed by fire. The locusts, which had caused the disaster, flew into the flames and were destroyed. Dodgeson, trying to escape with stolen dinosaur embryos, died in the facility when he was attacked by a pack of Dilophosaurus. Dr. Wu survived and surrendered to authorities. He provided testimony about biosyn's illegal activities and shared his research data, hoping to ensure that the technology he had developed would be used responsibly. A new status quo. In the aftermath of the Biosyn disaster, governments around the world took coordinated action on the dinosaur situation. International agreements established protected zones where dinosaurs could live safely, while also creating clear protocols for managing dinosaurs that posed threats to human populations. The Biosyn Valley, despite the devastation, became one of these protected zones. Many of the dinosaurs that had lived there survived the fires, and the valley's isolation made it an ideal sanctuary. With Biosyn defunct and its assets seized, the facility was converted into a legitimate research station staffed by scientists committed to studying and protecting dinosaurs. Claire's Dinosaur Protection Group received official recognition and government funding. The organization expanded its work, creating sanctuaries around the world and working to reduce conflicts between humans and dinosaurs. Owen continued his work with raptors, but now as part of a broader program to understand and manage these intelligent predators. Blue and Beta lived freely in a protected wilderness area, with Owen checking on them periodically but no longer trying to train or control them. Maisie Lockwood, no longer in hiding, became a symbol of genetic technology's positive potential. Her existence proved that cloning could be done safely and ethically when proper precautions were taken. She worked with researchers studying genetics and advocating for responsible use of biotechnology. Dr. Grant, Dr. Sattler, and Dr. Malcolm, the three survivors of the original Jurassic Park disaster, retired from active involvement in dinosaur matters. They had seen the entire arc of the story from Hammond's initial dream through multiple disasters to a kind of resolution. They had done what they could to guide humanity toward responsible coexistence with the creatures they had helped bring back to life. Dinosaurs were now a permanent part of Earth's ecosystem once again. They existed in the wild, in protected sanctuaries, and yes, still occasionally in captivity, though heavily regulated. The initial panic had given way to a wary acceptance, and even in some places, appreciation. Children grew up in a world where dinosaurs were not just fossils and reconstructions, but living animals that could be studied and protected. New fields of science emerged, focused on understanding how ancient creatures adapted to modern environments. The question was no longer whether humans and dinosaurs could coexist. They were coexisting, for better or worse. The question now was how to do so sustainably, safely, and ethically. Epilogue. Looking forward. As we near the end of this journey through the complete Jurassic Park timeline, it's worth reflecting on what we've witnessed. From the ancient world where dinosaurs ruled for over 160 million years, through their extinction and fossilization, to their resurrection in the modern era, we've seen an incredible story unfold. We've watched as human ambition and scientific capability combined to achieve what seemed impossible, bringing back creatures extinct for 65 million years. We've seen how that achievement, born of wonder and dreams, led to disaster after disaster, because humans failed to respect the power of life and nature. We've seen how life finds a way, adapting and surviving despite all attempts to control and contain it. The dinosaurs, created in laboratories and genetically engineered to be dependent and sterile, overcame every limitation placed upon them. They bred when they were designed not to. They thrived when they were supposed to die. They adapted to modern ecosystems despite being designed for extinct ones. We've witnessed the ethical debates that genetic resurrection sparked. Were humans right to bring back extinct species? Did the dinosaurs have a right to exist? Were they magnificent creatures deserving of protection, or dangerous mistakes that should be eliminated? Different people reached different conclusions, and those debates continue. The timeline we've explored spans from 250 million years ago to the present day, but the story is not over. Dinosaurs continue to evolve and adapt. Human society continues to adjust to their presence. New discoveries about dinosaur biology and behavior are made constantly. The technology that created them continues to advance, raising new possibilities and new ethical questions. Perhaps the most important lesson from this timeline is about hubris and responsibility. John Hammond wanted to create something wonderful, but he didn't fully consider the consequences. Masrani Corporation wanted to build on Hammond's dream, but they created hybrids without understanding what they were making. Biosyn sought profit and power, using genetic engineering without proper ethical boundaries. Each time, the result was disaster. Each time, people died because humans tried to control forces beyond their understanding. And each time, the dinosaurs persisted, because life is resilient and will not be easily contained. But there's also hope in this story. The survivors of these disasters learned from their experiences. Claire Deering transformed from someone who saw dinosaurs as assets to someone who fought to protect them. Owen Grady learned to respect rather than control the raptors he worked with. Dr. Wu, after decades of creating monsters, finally shared his knowledge freely to benefit others. Humanity as a whole has slowly learned to coexist with dinosaurs, developing systems and protocols to manage the situation as responsibly as possible. It's not perfect. There are still conflicts, still deaths, still problems. But there's a growing understanding that dinosaurs are not attractions or weapons or tools. They are living creatures that share the planet with us, and we have a responsibility to treat them accordingly. As you drift toward sleep, think about this long journey through time. Think about the ancient world where dinosaurs first emerged, the catastrophe that ended their reign, the millions of years they lay dormant as fossils, and their unexpected resurrection in our modern age. Think about the islands Isla Nublar and Isla Sorna, where these creatures walked again after 65 million years. Think about the people who encountered them, who were terrified by them, who studied them, who fought them, and who ultimately learned to respect them. Think about Blue the raptor, who survived disaster after disaster and eventually lived free with her child in the wilderness. Think about the great Tyrannosaurus rex, captured and displayed and used as an attraction, but still retaining its dignity and power throughout decades of captivity and chaos. Think about how the world changed when these creatures returned, and how humanity had to change with it. The complete Jurassic Park timeline is a story about ambition and consequence, about control and chaos, about extinction and resurrection. It's about the relationship between humans and nature, and what happens when that relationship is disrupted by technology and hubris. But most of all, it's a reminder that life persists. No matter how many times humans try to control it, contain it, or eliminate it, life finds a way to continue. That was true 65 million years ago when birds survived the extinction that killed the dinosaurs. It was true in the Mesozoic era when dinosaurs adapted and evolved over millions of years. And it's true now, in our modern world, where resurrected dinosaurs have found ways to survive and thrive, despite every obstacle placed in their path. Rest now, and let the images of this grand timeline drift through your mind. The ancient ferns and cycads of the Jurassic forests, the massive sauropods reaching for treetops, the clever raptors hunting in coordinated packs, the mighty tyrannosaurs ruling their territories. See them walking again on tropical islands, magnificent and terrible. See them scattered across modern landscapes, adapting to a world utterly different from the one they evolved for. See them living in sanctuaries, protected and studied, no longer entertainment or weapons, but creatures with a right to exist. The story of Jurassic Park, from beginning to end, from 250 million years ago to today, is complete. The dinosaurs have returned, and they are here to stay. Humanity has learned to live with them, imperfectly but genuinely, acknowledging both their danger and their wonder. And perhaps, as you fall asleep, you can imagine a future where humans and dinosaurs truly coexist, where the lessons of the past have been fully learned, where genetic technology is used wisely and ethically, and where these magnificent creatures from Earth's distant past have found a permanent place in Earth's present and future. Sleep well and dream of dinosaurs.